You're watching a distance learning program about the United States Marine Corps in World War I. In Part 1, we discussed the origins of World War I, specifically in Europe. For this section, in Part 2, we will discuss how and why the United States became involved in World War I in 1917.
World War I ended a long tradition of avoiding involvement in European conflicts, dating back to George Washington's famous farewell address when he said, quote, "The great rule of conduct for us, in regard to foreign nations, is in extending our commercial relations, to have with them as little political connection as possible." How did the United States go from an isolationist country to an allied power? Although Americans tested the waters of imperialism in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the country remained largely politically isolated. Americans wanted to stay out of global affairs, especially those brewing in Europe. When Woodrow Wilson became president in 1912, he ran against a number of candidates, including former Republican President and Bull Moose or Progressive Party candidate Theodore Roosevelt and Republican incumbent President William Howard Taft. Roosevelt ran under a campaign called New Nationalism, which called to regulate big business, impose radical tax reforms, and prioritize the federal government towards social and economic reform. Wilson touted a program called New Freedom, which sought to destroy corporate monopolies and open up opportunities to small businesses by reducing tariffs and instituting banking reform and antitrust laws. Wilson did not run on a campaign promising to stay out of conflict. That was not the case by the next presidential election. By 1914, America could no longer ignore their role in the changing of world affairs. Wilson vowed to stay neutral, but a series of circumstances would eventually compel the United States to act. Ultimately, the United States went to war in 1917 for three main reasons: unrestricted submarine warfare, the inability to stay neutral, and the Zimmermann telegram. On 7 May 1915, the German submarine U-20 sank the ocean liner RMS Lusitania near the coast of Ireland. Of the 1,959 passengers on board, 1,198 were killed, including 128 American citizens. A week later, President Wilson sent a letter to Germany about the growing concern, distress, and amazement concerning the sinking of Lusitania. In this letter, he also stated that, quote, "The government and the people of the United States look to the Imperial German government for just, prompt, and enlightened action in this vital matter with the greater confidence because the United States and Germany are bound together by special ties of friendship." In essence, Wilson objected to the attack, but sought nothing further. Wilson called for Germany to abandon submarine warfare and allow neutral American citizens to travel safely across the ocean. He would eventually go as far to say any attack against the United States was, quote, "deliberately unfriendly." International opinion of Germany changed, further spiraling the United States towards belligerency. Many in the United States began to question neutrality, as the event was highly dramatized in propaganda cartoons and posters. The second reason why Americans went to war was the country's inability to stay neutral. Strongly tied to the previous reason, the United States had strong economic and political ties to Great Britain, who at the time was instituting their own naval blockade of Germany to counteract unrestricted submarine warfare. Wilson believed he could broker a peace in Europe, while others like Theodore Roosevelt created the preparedness movement to bolster America's military after the outbreak of war. Eventually, Wilson and Congress passed the National Defense Act of 1916, which increased the size of the Army and Navy. Oddly enough, Wilson won a re-election in November of that same year under the slogan, "He kept us out of war." His presidential action in the face of a looming threat of war was enough to navigate neutrality and secure a political victory in the 1916 election, but not forever. That is especially the case by early 1917. The increase in the American military in 1916 triggered Germany to begin unrestricted submarine warfare against the United States in 1917. On 31 January 1917, Germany stated that it would target neutral shipping in designated war zones overseas. American merchant ships began to fall prey to German submarine wolf packs by March 1917. After Germany committed to unrestricted submarine warfare against the United States, they decided to ally themselves with Mexico. German Foreign Minister Arthur Zimmermann sent a telegram to Mexico on 16 January 1917 detailing a plan for Mexico to join the war on the side of the Central Powers against the United States. In return, Germany agreed to pay for the cost of the war and the recovery of territory ceded to the United States in 1848 after the Mexican-American War, namely parts of present-day Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. British intelligence intercepted the message and sent it to Wilson, who released the information on 1 March. Resentment against Germany grew. It was only a matter of time. After nearly 3 years of keeping America out of war, Wilson could wait no longer. On 2 April 1917, President Wilson asked Congress to declare war on Germany, stating, quote, "We have no selfish ends to serve, and to enter the conflict to make the world safe for democracy." On 6 April 1917, Congress declared war. America was prepared, for better or worse, to go over there. What America needed to help them win was a few good Marines. This video discussed the changing opinion of United States politicians and citizens from neutral isolationist in 1914 to willing belligerent in 1917. The final video will discuss the role of the United States Marine Corps in World War I and the experiences of Marines in France.
Johnny, get your gun, get your gun, get your gun. Take it on the run, on the run, on the run.